Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Friday, August 23rd, 2013. Now, our top story tonight is, what actor is going to play Batman? I'm sure that was what was on your mind. With war about to break out in the Middle East, which could turn into a world war, with the White House pushing for a race war here at home, and with the government spying on your every move and breaking every law to do so, the most important thing that was trending on Twitter and the mainstream media today was, who's going to play Batman? A lot of pushback that Ben Affleck has been chosen perhaps to play that. You know, it's hard to believe that the really important issues are not being covered, but it's also hard to believe the way these important issues are being spun in the media. Now, CNN had an exclusive interview with Obama because, of course, CNN is his favorite propaganda media outlet. And he had these comments to say about what's going on in Syria. He believes that he's got a Gulf of Tonkin incident in Syria that he can use to start another war. He said, Assad's forces have used chemical weapons, and the time within which a decision about such an action must be made has been shortened. In other words, as the headline says, key decisions are nearing on both Syria and Egypt. Now listen to this other quote that Obama had. He said, if the U.S. goes in and attacks another country without a UN mandate and without clear evidence that can be presented, then there are questions in terms of whether international law supports it. Do you hear that? It's just like Bush #1 in the first Iraq War. He said, if this is done without a UN mandate about international law, well, what about American law? What about a declaration of war from the U.S. Congress? Doesn't care. Doesn't care about that, just like Bush didn't care about that. You think there's a difference between Bush's and Obama? Do you think there's a difference, for instance, between Obama and McCain? Think about this. We've got an attack being set by for a Syrian invasion in motion following a reported chemical attack. This is a story from Infowars.com. Kurt Nemo writes, he's got a quote from John McCain. This is what McCain says about the war. He says, it's a long past for the United States and our friends and allies to respond to Assad's continuing mass atrocities in Syria. Really? Continuing? With decisive action, including limited military strikes to degrade Assad's air power and ballistic missile capabilities, said John McCain, the other choice that we were presented with in 2008. So Obama wants to move in as long as we've got the UN approval and don't break any international law. But of course, McCain wants to go in right away. So the next time you have an election and somebody is trying to push on you that you should vote for the lesser of two evils, just understand there's no difference between the foreign policy between the Bushes and Obamas and the McCains. They're all the same. They're all doing what the military-industrial complex wants them to do. And there's evidence now that the U.S. is not even waiting for even the UN to okay this. There's a report from Max Slavo based on an article from Le Figaro. The title is, Hundreds of American troops and CIA operatives have entered Syria. He says, if the following from France's second largest newspaper, Le Figaro, is accurate, then we must assume that war is now a foregone conclusion. According to our information, the regime's opponents, this is Le Figaro saying this, supervised by Jordanian, Israeli, and American commandos moving toward Damascus since mid-August. This attack could explain the possible use of the Syrian president in chemical weapons. According to the information presented by Le Figaro, the first trained in guerrilla warfare by the Americans and Jordan Syrian troops reportedly entered into action since mid-August in southern Syria in the region of Deraa. A first group of 300 men, probably supported by Israeli and Jordanian commandos, as well as men of the CIA, crossed the border August 17. A second would have joined the 19th. And the French paper suggests that perhaps the Syrian government launched the gas attack because of this invasion. Not likely. The gas wasn't directed at them, but more importantly, Syria and their ally Russia know that this would galvanize opposition against them. They have no reason to do that. It's important to note that the U.S. standard method of operation to justify involvements in a war is to stage an attack that they then blame on the party that they wish to attack, called a false flag. Those who know real American history see an ominous connection between CIA commandos entering Syria and a gas attack a few days later. Now, of course, the French paper is saying, well, if the U.S. is invaded, then maybe that's why Assad attacked a village. That wouldn't make any sense. He doesn't have any reason to do that. He knows that that's going to make him an international pariah. He knows that that is the tripwire that they've been looking for. And in spite of what McCain says, there haven't been numerous attacks like this. They've all been debunked. And there's evidence that this one may not be genuine as well. Chemical weapons experts are saying that this doesn't look like a sarin attack. In another article from InfoWars from Paul Joseph Watson titled U.S. Trained Rebels Move Toward Damascus Days Before Chemical Weapons Attack, he quotes Paula Vanenen of the Finnish Institute for Verification of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And this person questions, says, at the moment, I am not totally convinced because the people that are helping them are without any protective clothing and without any respirators. In a real case, they would have been contaminated. They would have also been having symptoms. Now, although some experts are claiming nerve agent gas used was likely sarin, he says, compare the photos of the protective gear worn by Japanese chemical weapons specialists who did clean a metro station in Tokyo 8 hours after a real bottle of sarin gas was thrown in 1995. Compare that to the complete lack of protective gear worn by those seen handling victims in the video footage released earlier this week. Now understand, people really died, children really died, but when we're talking about the justification for war, it really matters how they died, and it matters who killed them, because that's the basis of them pushing for war. And also understand that once this war starts out, it is going to be a lot more people dying and suffering, dying agonizing deaths. We need to look at this very carefully. We need to not be goaded into jumping into a war as Obama and McCain and the one war party that we have running Washington wants to do. That's precisely what they want. Now here at home, we have the White House pushing for a U.S. race war. And in an article that was co-written by Alex Jones and Paul Joseph Watson, they ask, is the media covering up the beginning of a race war? George Zimmerman's acquittal last month drew a line under nearly 18 months of hand-wringing over the threat posed to black people by racially charged hate crimes. Yet we have a case this week where a baseball player from Australia, Lane, was slaughtered by a gunshot to the back as part of a gang initiation by 3 juveniles, an incident which the media tried to downplay initially as, quote, bored teens. 2 of the suspects are black, and it subsequently emerged that one of the suspects had posted racist tweets on his account before the murder. Now, of course, Barack Obama, who's personally inserted himself into the Trayvon Martin case on 2 separate occasions, said he was not familiar with Lane's murder, according to the White House spokesman. And in light of several high-profile black-on-white murders in recent days, the invective has been noticeably less, virtually non-existent. And there on the screen, you can see 3 people that in just the last couple of days have been brutally murdered. 2 of them shot. The elderly man in the center is an 88-year-old World War II veteran who was beaten to death. Now, compare this to the Trayvon Zimmerman case, which got essentially 24/7 coverage. It was always a lead story, always with a racist charge background being put in there to try to goad this race war into happening. Why is it that they're not talking about these racial attacks now? Well, because that's exactly what they were trying to stoke. When these kids go on Twitter and talk about how they wanted to kill white people, beat white people, they're not attacked, don't have their accounts shut down. And of course, the White House and the mainstream media is not complaining about that. And in the case of one of these people that died, David Stantucci, the police initially, wanting to avoid any appearance of a racially charged crime, said that it was a burglary. Although he didn't have his wallet stolen, he didn't have his car keys taken, and he didn't have his cell phone taken. So they're going to every length that they can to ignore this, to downplay this when it is black on white, but when it is white on black, possibly, they try to play that up into something that, in the case of Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, a jury agreed did not happen. Now, of course, there's another agenda just besides the race war. They also use this as a case for gun control. And they are coming in on these cases with gun control. Piers Morgan was quick to jump in on his agenda. And as usually, he likes to put this in as a gun control issue. This is what he tweeted. When an innocent Australian student is shot dead in Oklahoma for fun, America's gun crisis becomes the world's problem. Isn't that amazing? And then when people criticized him for blindly pushing his gun control agenda, he pushed back and said, memo to all the idiots tweeting me that the Australian student murder was a race crime. One of the 3 killers was white. Well, you know, when you look at this, he's saying this on Twitter, obviously not looking at the tweets that one of the accused killers put out there, which was obviously a racist tweet saying that he was going around attacking people just based on their race. But if he's going to blame a drive-by shooting and call for gun control, if he's going to blame the gun in that as opposed to the people who are pulling the trigger, why doesn't he call for banning cars? You know, you can't have a drive-by shooting if you don't have a car. The car was every bit as much of an instrument in the drive-by shooting as the gun was. But, you know, if you take away the gun, if you take away the car, they're just going to ambush people and kill them with a machete if they have that kind of hate that's been stoked by the mainstream media and the White House over and over again for a year and a half in the Trayvon Martin case. Now, why do they need a race war? Why do they need that kind of distraction? And why is the Homeland Gestapo building up for a massive civil war? Media. Now, CNN had an exclusive interview with Obama because, of course, CNN is his favorite propaganda media outlet, and he had these comments to say about what's going on in Syria. He believes that he's got a Gulf of Tonkin incident in Syria that he can use to start another war. He said, Assad's forces have used chemical weapons, and the time within which a decision about... It's Friday, August 23rd, 2013. Now, our top story tonight is, what actor is going to play Batman? I'm sure that was what was on your mind. With war about to break out in the Middle East, which could turn into a world war, with the White House pushing for a race war here at home, and with the government spying on your every move and breaking every law to do so, the most important thing that was trending on Twitter and the mainstream media today was, who's going to play Batman? A lot of pushback that Ben Affleck has been chosen perhaps to play that. You know, it's hard to believe that the really important issues are not being covered, but it's also hard to believe the way these important issues are being spun in the media. Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight.